How's it going, everyone? My name is Chris Lepardi, and I have Dan Cortine here with me. And welcome to A Father's Love Healing Through Heartache. If this is your first time ever listening to us talk, Dan and I both lost our sons. And as a way to deal with our grief, we decided to start doing some recordings and bringing other grieving fathers on and give them a chance to speak their mind and give their feelings out. So, with that, Dan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay, Chris. It's good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you too. It's been a couple weeks, but I'm glad we're back here recording again. And this week we have someone that's been really influential for me after I lost my son Mason almost 2 years ago now. I met Dennis through social media. We happen to both be in the military. Dennis was in the military a while ago, and I'm in now. And that's kind of how we met our connection. And with that, I don't want to take too much of Dennis's time. I want to just throw it right to him, so for him to tell his story. So with that, we have Dennis Jordan on. Dennis, welcome, and thank you for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you, Chris. It's good to be here, and I'm always glad to share my story about my son, Ryan. Ryan was a very special kid, full of mischief and just an all-around boy. So I'm just going to give a little background of who Ryan was and tell a little bit about our story and how we have lived in spite of the fact that we had a child die. And so many times when a child dies, it's very destructive. It's very no one ever expects to bury their child. Our children are supposed to bury us. We're not supposed to bury our children. And so when that happens, it throws the whole cycle of life just really out of kilter. And so many couples, unfortunately, do not make it after the death of a child because they're grieving so much themselves and they can't rescue each other. And so I have a story of how my wife and I have lived through this. And in fact, coming this June, we will have been married 49 years. So we've been together a long time and went through grief together and have grown a lot in spite of what we could consider the worst thing that can ever happen to a parent, and that's having to bury your child. And so Ryan was almost 3 years old in 1982. And my wife took him to the pediatric clinic on one of the bases we were living on because he was having a lot of bruising and he was very tired and he could not hardly walk across the floor. And they called me from my office and had me come to the doctor's office. And that afternoon, about 2:30 in Altus Air Force Base, Oklahoma, we were told that our almost 3-year-old child had leukemia. Nothing we would have ever thought possible or would have even ever dreamed could happen. And that night, the Air Force, I was in the Air Force, and I'll say this, the Air Force treated us throughout all this time in ways that were just unbelievable. A C-9 Nightingale aircraft landed at Altus Air Force Base. They flew our son to Woodford Hall, Texas, down in San Antonio, and we began treatment. We went through 3 years of treatment, and we had some great highs. I mean, it looked like Ryan was beating this. It looked as if we were out of the woods. And then, unfortunately, in September of 1985, we had then moved to Washington, D.C., and he was being treated at Walter Reed. And we were told there's nothing else we can do for Ryan. His leukemia is back, and we've exhausted everything we know to do. So that was in the fall of 85. And then, unfortunately, on December the 10th, right just before Christmas, Ryan lost the battle with leukemia. He was 6.5 years old. And in our belief system, Ryan, he's got the best life ever. He went to heaven and he no longer had leukemia. And he's got the best life. We're still here on this earth challenging and struggling along, but our son is fine. So there was a lot of peace in that. But Ryan, the thing about Ryan was just such a huggy child. And he was that way before he got leukemia. And then even after that, he was even more loving and huggy. And so when Ryan died, I would tell people, I literally crawled in the coffin with Ryan. I just said, life is over. I don't really want to live. I don't want to be alive anymore. And so, unfortunately for me, I had a suicide plan. I was going to kill myself. And so part of what I would say today to people if you are in the fresh throes of grief or even further down the road and you feel like, I don't want to live, I hope my story will say to you, there are things to live for, and life does go on after the death of a child, because so often we feel like it's not going to go on. What do I do? How do I do this? I can't live. And so I was planning to kill myself. And unfortunately for me, there was the lieutenant colonel nurse that I was working with. I happened to be in the medical field. So you can imagine for me dealing with a son who was dying from leukemia and then having to go take care of patients, it was like overwhelming. I mean, I had to go listen to people talk about their big toe hurting, and I had just buried my son. So you can imagine, and that's the way it is with many of us sometimes. We hear people grumble and complain about, well, my car didn't do right, or I didn't get the car I wanted, or something's not going right. And we think, you want to say, are you stupid? Have you lost your mind? I just buried my child. Could I care less about whether your big toe's hurting or how the carpet is in your home and stuff like that? And so it was tough. And so I decided I'm going to end this. I don't want to be around anymore. And what was interesting is, and my wife sometimes will say, what do you mean? What kept me from killing myself was I had a baby sister who was about 10 years younger than me. And I said, I cannot do this to my baby sister. And my wife would say, what do you mean you couldn't do it to your baby sister? What about me and your other son? And so it was like, but then she says, whatever kept you alive, that's okay. So I want to just say to anyone who's contemplating, I want to throw in the towel, I can't go on, don't throw in the towel. Today is a bad day. Today is probably, you're thinking, I don't know if I can get through the day. And as I tell people all the time, the way we get through grief, particularly the grief of a child, is we do it 1 minute at a time. Don't try to look at it. How am I going to make it through the day? How am I going to make it through next week? How am I going to make it through next month? What you do is you say, I'm going to make it 1 minute at a time. The other thing I want to say too is be very aware that when you're in the freshness of grief, be aware of making major decisions. Try not to make major decisions. For us as a family, I was in the military. So if you had a child die, you could take what they call a humanitarian move and you could move to another base. Well, we were in Maryland. Our son is buried in North Carolina. We are from North Carolina. And so we thought that moving to a base closer to where he lived would be beneficial for us. Well, actually, it did not prove to be beneficial for us. It actually cut us off from a support system. We had a wonderful church. We had a wonderful community in the Maryland area. And when we uprooted ourselves from that, we lost so much. And Debbie and I was just talking about this the other day. We were talking about when we left that home that Ryan had lived in, and I can even get emotional thinking about it now, knowing that we were leaving a place that our son had lived in. And now every place we went to from then on out in the rest of our lives, our son would never be a part of that. That was very hard to deal with. And then what was even harder is you go to a new community. No one knew we had a son named Ryan. They would say, how many children do you have? And we'd always say, we have two, one in heaven and one with us. And so it's almost like, so if you're thinking about, if you're in the fresh throes of grief, I would encourage you, try not to make major decisions in the first 12 months of that grief process, because you may look back and think that was probably not the best decision for us to make. So that's just a little side note that we did make it, and of course I'm still here. And so getting back to, if you're thinking of throwing in the towel, I just finally said, okay, I'm in the coffin. I don't want to live anymore. I'm literally, it's like I'm a dead man walking is what I was. And so I took and I began to think, okay, well, I decided, no, I'm not going to kill myself. And I want to jump quite a few years ahead in the fact that when you think about suicide, you think I'm going to do myself in and it's going to all be over. But then you don't, if you can just imagine, what will life be if I choose not to do this? And for me, what life is Debbie and I have been married coming on 49 years to a beautiful woman who I love more than life itself. And we had one son that survived Ryan. He was older. Chad was 9. And then after Ryan died, we couldn't have any other natural children, so we adopted a little girl when she was 12 days old named Abby. And she became a joy of our life. Abby means joy. And so I look at those kind of things and think, if you check out, you miss all those things that you would have as a part of your life. And so I'm going to jump ahead. We spent 22 years in the Air Force, had a great life in the Air Force, spent 3 wonderful years in Aviano Air Force Base, Italy. And so what I'm trying to say is, yes, life is dark when your child dies. You don't think you want to live. You don't think you want to go on. I want to challenge you, go on. Pick those feet up one more day, get out there one more day, and just say, I'm going to live through this. I'm a survivor. And that's what I believe bereaved parents are. Those that survive the death of a child, they are definitely survivors, because it would be much easier just to throw it in and say, I'm done with this, to hell with this, I'm out of here. I don't want anything to do with life. And so we retired from the military. Our son married. So my goal was, trying to say is, if you check out, you don't get the legacy that you have, as I'm now coming on almost 69 years of age. If I'd have checked out in my 30s, I'd have missed having a little girl. I would have missed seeing my children grow up. I would have missed having 7 grandchildren. I have 6 granddaughters, and I have 1 grandson. My grandson, the unique thing about him is my son, Ryan's brother, said as he was growing up, he says, one day I'm going to grow up, have a little boy, and I'm going to name him Ryan Michael Jordan. Well, we have a grandson who's 13 years old, and his name is Ryan Michael Jordan. So say that with tears in my eyes to say, if you're thinking of quitting, don't quit. Stay with it. Yes, it's hard. It's challenging. There's days when you just think, I can't do this. I just can't do it. And for me, one of the things that helped me, and I'm not pushing this on anyone else, but for me, what got me through so much of this is, I do have a faith in God. And I chose to say, okay, I don't understand this pain. I don't know how I'm ever going to get through this pain, but my faith was a great stabilizing factor in carrying me through. And so I think in finishing tonight, I would just say, don't quit. Whatever you do, don't quit. In fact, some ways it's easier to quit. It would have been easier just to check out of life and face continuing to work and face the pain. But I'm so glad I did not check out. I'm so glad that I chose to say, I'm going to live. And I wouldn't trade where I am now in retirement and being around my grandchildren, being with my wife, reaching out to other people, loving life. And so when our children die, we don't feel like we can love life. We don't feel like we can even live. Well, I'm a survivor. And 37 years later, I'm here to tell you, don't quit. Keep going. And yes, sometimes it's rough, but guess what? Life, as Abraham Lincoln, who we know Abraham Lincoln lost at least one child, maybe more. Abraham Lincoln says, in times of grief, we feel like the sun will never shine again. But the reality is the sun does and will shine again. So I just challenge you to just hang in there, get supportive people around you, do what it takes to survive, but it's well worth it. And that's kind of my story that I had wanted to share tonight.
Dan, I'll let you start, buddy.
Well, Dennis, thank you for sharing that. I cannot not think about all the dads who are on the grief pages of Facebook that we're all on that are struggling mightily, and some of them openly talk about suicide. Chris and I have openly talked about it. I've had that thought before and discussed it, that Erica and I are in no way suicidal, but that thought does cross most of our minds.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
there are men that are going to listen to you right now that I can't imagine that you're not literally saving somebody's life by sharing your story and how you got through it. So thank you for that on behalf of every man who's going to listen to this. And I think probably there's a very good chance that there are people listening to this that aren't grieving the loss of a child, but grieving the loss of any loved one or a job loss or whatever, cancer diagnosis, whatever it is, and it has nothing to do with the loss of a child. But they're here to hear somebody openly talk about mental health struggles and suicidal thoughts and how to get through it is so powerful. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. My privilege.
Dennis, I thought it was interesting how obviously I feel like our stories are very mirrored. They're very close to each other because a lot of the stuff that happened to you also happened to me. So I feel that kind of connection in sense of, how good the Air Force has been to us.
Mm-hmm.
When Mason passed away, how they took care of us right away. I just want to reiterate the exact same thing that you said about making that decision. We also made that humanitarian move decision to come to Dover. And I really think now, God has a plan for us. I really, truly believe that. Now I'm wondering, it's funny that you say that because the other day I had mentioned, I was like, I was talking to my wife, Amanda. I was like, if I would have known I was going to get promoted, I might have just stayed at Idaho and then, toughed it out. And then, it would have been, like you said, easier for my kids for sure. They had friends there in Idaho. We moved here to Dover mid COVID. So they go to virtual school right away. So now we're here almost a year and a half, 2 years, and they still don't have any like legit solid friends here. And I just wanted to reiterate how I think that is important to not make any rash decisions in those moments of grief because, like you said, we really did think it was going to help us. And in a way, I don't regret the decision because Dover was a place for us to heal. We were able to visit Mason often driving to Buffalo. But, now I'm wondering, I'm kind of playing that what if game. Like, what if I would have just stayed at Mountain Home Air Force Base in Idaho? How would this have all worked out? Would it have been better for us, So, not to keep beating that horse, but making those rash decisions.
What I would say is, as bereaved parents, give ourselves grace that we made the best decision we thought at the time that would be the best decision, and we thought it was going to be wonderful getting to North Carolina. Ryan's grave was an hour away, so we thought, oh yes, we'll go more often, and so we kind of like you, we had the great intentions, but we just had to learn to give ourselves grace that life doesn't always, the decisions we make don't always turn out the way we thought they were going to turn out.
Yeah, I know Chris and I have talked about it often, but you said literally do it 1 minute at a time. And that is so true. For people who are going through grief, that is exactly it. I don't have the energy to think about an hour from now. It's literally what can I do 1 step at a time, 1 minute at a time to survive this moment, this event, this task, whatever it is.
Yep.
And it's rough. And it feels almost impossible. And for people who are not grieving or not, again, I think this is so applicable to people in any walk of life, no matter what the pain is, that if you're in a good spot with life right now, look around you, you're going to find people who are struggling mightily in today's world more so than ever. And they're right there with us doing life literally 1 minute at a time. And we need to give grace to ourselves. And we're asking you all who are strong and healthy right now to give us grace because we literally are trying to figure out where to step next.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. And Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, go. You finish.
No, and just do the best you can. Sometimes it was just a matter of, for me being a nurse, I made it through one more shift. It was like, I don't know if I can make it through one more shift, but I made it through one more shift. So sometimes it's just a matter, well, I'll go to this job one more day. I'll make it one day. And again, and the way I made it through days is I made it by minutes. If I had tried to live the whole shift, I would not have been able to live the shift. I lived it 1 minute at a time. Yeah.
Dennis, I wonder, in terms of some things Dan and I have talked about in the past are, you've obviously say you're very happy now with your life and the way everything works. Dan and I have discussed in the past how a lot of bereaved parents or even people going through grief, how they really feel that guilt at the beginning when they first start to experience joy again after losing their loved one. I was curious how you did that with Ryan when you first started experiencing joy again. If you know, a lot of us have felt kind of guilty or like we shouldn't be having that joyous moment because we don't have our loved one with us anymore. How did you get through that?
I think the way you get through it is it just begins to come back. And for me, Ryan was so full of life himself and so full of joy. I mean, just even up to the very end, this kid he was just a kid. And so for me, it's just the recollection that, you know, would Ryan want me to be miserable the rest of my life, around with a sad face, never laugh again, never have any joy? And knowing Ryan the way I knew Ryan, absolutely not. He was the life of the party, and he would want us to be having a party. And again, my faith helps a whole lot in that because of knowing my son's got the best life ever. I mean, that's how I believe it. And so he no longer has leukemia. He no longer has any pain. I mean, every moment for him is nothing but joy. So for me to just never allow myself to have any joy would really, in some ways, to me, be a betrayal of him because he was so full of joy. So, but you're right. When you first start having life back again, or you start smiling more, or laughing, or you do think, how can I do this? My kid is dead. I buried my kid. Well, uh, do it. Go with the joy, and because you can rest assured, the joy is going to come. But guess what? You're going to get hit side the face again real fast with some remembrance, or the next birthday's coming, or the next death date's coming, or some of those kind of things. So life has a way of readjusting us if we think we're getting too joyful. I think that those of us that buried a child, there will always be days in our lives and seasons where we recognize this was a very painful time, and we'll never forget it. So as long as we have our memory. So I go with the joy, and I believe our kids would not want us being sad all of our lives because for some reason they didn't live.
I think the faith angle is huge, and that's what keeps us going. And absolutely, if you believe in God and you believe your child is heaven, we don't want our kids back on earth. We do, but when you really stop to process absolutely, they're in a better place. We don't want them here. We want them back selfishly for us.
Exactly right.
And Erica and we've discussed it. Like I just said, we're not suicidal in any way, but we're like, God, take us whenever you want. We're ready to go because we want to see Jameson. We know he's in a better place. We're happy to go join him on your terms. I'm curious with the faith angle. You see a lot of people, if you read enough grief group comments and stuff, of people who are mad at God and have given up on God. And I can't follow a God who would be so ugly as to take a child, or whatever argument you want to use along those lines. Dennis, can you address that for people whose faith is really struggling to a point where they're walking away from it?
I believe so. I would say God's big enough. If you feel like you need to walk away, when you're ready to come back, he'll be there waiting on you. In other words, I don't, and I mean, I went through a period of time where I was quite angry. Why did my child not get well? What was wrong with my life? Why did you not answer my prayer? And I came to the realization that there are some whys in life. We're going to know the why. And even if I knew the why and it didn't bring Ryan back, what does it do for me? So if you're struggling with your faith, God's not struggling with you. He knows exactly where you are. He knows what you're struggling with. He knows why you're angry. He knows why you're mad. He knows why you want to run. But my view of God is whenever you're ready to come back and say, I need help, he's there to help you. So I think but the faith struggle can be very, very real. And yet my faith of knowing my son is a-okay. That does more for me than probably anything in the world, is to know that he's good. And as David said in the Old Testament, when they lost the baby that he had with Bathsheba, when that child died, David had been fasting and praying that his child would get well, and his child didn't get well. And all of a sudden, he stops mourning, and they say to him, "Why have you stopped mourning?" And he said, "Well, he cannot come to me, but I can go to him." And so the joy for us that have a faith system is that Ryan's not coming back to me. That's not going to happen. But I'm going to go to him. And so, and I hope to live a long life. I mean, I'm not ready to check out today by any means. But I know the joy and the peace that when that time does come, I'll be with him. So I don't know if that answers it or not, but the faith struggle is very real. And I would never be critical of anyone having a faith struggle because, again, bearing a child, any pain greater than that? The only pain I could think that's greater than that is if you had to bury more than one child. I can't even think of that nightmare. So to me, that's the worst nightmare of life. So, okay.
Yeah. I know I've shared, my faith has been rough the last 3 years, but I think a lot of things you've said highlight how I've progressed through it. You have to have that support network. And whether it's a faith support network or a non-faith, doesn't matter. You need to have a faith support network of people that you can lean on, and they will carry you through those moments where you just can't get up yourself.
Yep.
And yeah, it's okay. What I've reprocessed and put back in the forefront of my head is that it is okay to be mad at God. It is okay to question God. It is okay to walk away from God while you're sorting things out, because God is there, and our boys are there with him, right by his side.
Yeah, and God is a big God. He can take us being angry. I mean, that's at least in my view. God understands when I'm angry or when I'm hurt, when I'm sad. He knows it all. Yeah,
absolutely. And I'm not there yet, but from what I've heard from other people who have gone through a faith crisis, when we come out the other side, our faith is even stronger because of the valleys. I mean, we are in the deepest valleys imaginable. And whenever we do come out to the other side, to be able to look back and see that, okay, God was there the whole time. One of the big things that sticks out to me in my questioning and trying to sort through things was the whole God is good aspect. If you've been in church and at all, you've heard God is good, God is good, God is good.
All the time, God is good.
Yeah. And that makes sense if you believe in it. Yeah, all that. But you know what? I don't see God being too good to me taking Jameson, and I don't see God being too good with COVID deaths and cancer, whatever you want. And one of my best friends helped open my eyes on that. God is good doesn't mean that right now at this moment my life is going to be all roses. God is good is eternity. And we've got to keep that perspective that through the valleys of life right now, God is still good, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to struggle through things and need to keep just growing and learning about him and supporting each other and all that.
Mm. Yeah.
But in the end, God's goodness will shine.
Yeah. There's no way the death of our children was good. There's nothing good about that. I mean, there's absolutely nothing. But I'm a firm believer that God can cause all things to work together for my good. But my child's death was not good. I would never be able to say that. But I can say that God has allowed me to be with meeting Chris, meeting other bereaved people, being a part of Compassionate Friends, doing things that I would never have done if Ryan had not died. Would I rather have Ryan here? You better believe I'd rather have Ryan here. I'd give all this stuff up in a minute to be able to have Ryan here. But since I can't do that, God can cause the things that were really meant to destroy us. He can cause some good to come out of that. But yeah, at least that's how I look at it. So, in fact, I heard a minister recently say that cancer's not good, children dying is not good, all kinds of things, rape, all kinds of things are not good. But God can turn those things around and cause good to come from that. But never would I say that's good. We live in a fallen world. I mean, let's face it. This world is not utopia.
No, definitely not. Those are definitely some great words of wisdom for sure. And I had a question in terms of, congratulations first off on your long marriage. That's amazing, 49 years. And um, if you wouldn't mind talking to us about if you and your wife had any kind of struggles or what struggles were when Ryan first passed and how through the years it progressed to the strong marriage you have now. Because I think like Dan and I have talked about in the past, that when you lose a child, it's almost like starting your life all over again. It's a whole new life. It's a new dynamic, new family dynamic, new relationship. Everything is different. It's not the same as it was before. So there's a lot of stress put on a marriage when you lose a child. And I'm curious how you guys made it and are still doing so well and loving each other, and any advice for us dads that are just, not as far down the line.
I think a lot of it depends upon the couple and even the personalities of the two people in the couple. I tend to be a very depressive individual, and with Ryan's death, I went through deep depression. I mean, for years, it was like this cloud was over me, and I just was not we knew I didn't want to live, but I did live, and my wife is more the we look at each other and you think about Winnie the Pooh. Well, my wife is Tigger all the way. She is a Tigger, and I am a Eeyore. Okay, I'm always looking for my tail. So that's a part of it. So I think sometimes with some couples, it's the fact that their personalities are so different, and so for us that was a plus. My wife was always very supportive, and the other thing I say to a couple though is remember you're both hurting so badly. Do not look for that spouse to be able to rescue you or make things good, because they cannot do that. So if you put that kind of pressure on, well, you've got to make me happy or you've got to do this, that's a pressure that cannot happen because you're both grieving so much. And we grieve very differently. Debbie was more private in her grief. I was more like boisterous with my grief, crying a lot. And so just a lot of differences. The other thing I would say to any married couple and is in the throes of grief, so often, and take this the right way, but so often couples, the last thing they want to think about is being intimate. Oh, I can't even think about my child died. How could I be intimate? Well, we found that being intimate was a way of healing for us. And so I encourage couples that if for some reason you've decided I can't be intimate anymore, I'm not even interested in sex, how could you even think about sex? I would say that that needs to be a part of your life because you love one another. That's a part of God's gift to us. And so I think for us, one of the things that helped us a lot is we continue to have an intimate life. Of course, there was a season there when a little bit shaky, but and I think for us being 49 years married, I think one of the reasons we've been 49 years married is because we've always made intimacy a vital part of our lives. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question or not, but I just say that you're both hurting, but when you can draw into one another, and one of the ways you do that is through intimacy. That builds up in you a I think almost like a fortress that it connects you together in a way that nothing else can. So I hope I'm kind of giving you some. This is how we've been married 49 years. Is
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I think I liked how you said too, and it made a lot of sense when you said it as I thought about it. You can't rescue each other at that moment. Like in a normal marriage, when something happens to one of them, the other spouse can help them, right? Get through it, whatever it is. And that pain is so intense and so great. I remember when Mason passed, I was a loner. I had to be alone. I didn't want to be by anyone at all.
Mhm. Right.
And Amanda wanted to be with her family the whole time, and I couldn't do it. I didn't want to be around them, and I didn't want to be, not that I didn't want to be around her. I just wanted to be at Mason's grave, sitting there for hours and hours. That's all I wanted. And, come to find out, and, we're very, still, I think, kind of new in our loss. We're not even at 2 years yet.
Right.
But Amanda told me, later on that she felt like I had abandoned her during that time. And I had to explain to her, like, I could not get through those moments myself. I was barely hanging on. I felt like I was drowning. Like literally, I was in the ocean, underwater, breathing through a straw. That's how hard it was. And she understood where I was coming from, and I understood where she was coming from, where she felt like I left her. It helped us get a little closer because we understood each other's pain a little better. And I think that kind of helped us too. So that open communication, being really willing to say, don't be harsh or mean to your spouse, but you have to be very honest with them, even if it might hurt their feelings a little bit, and say, hey, I'm sorry I couldn't help you. I was barely surviving myself. So that's how it helped Amanda and myself get to where we're at today. So
and very true. The full recognition of I can't take Debbie's pain away, and Debbie couldn't take my pain away. We each had. She was a mother, I was a father. There's different relationships with children based upon being a mother or father, and so we each had our own degree of pain. And just the truth that I can't take your pain away, and she couldn't take my pain away. So again, try not to put unrealistic expectations on the other spouse, because if you think that spouse can rescue you or take that pain away, you're setting yourself up for a total failure, because you cannot do that. It's no way.
I know Erica and I, we went through the same thing you guys are describing, and we were fortunate that we figured things out early on, that we committed it. It may have been the day of Jameson's passing or the day after, and we looked at each other and said, divorce is not an option.
No.
And I think that was one of the biggest things we could have done, because it immediately set the expectation and took that off the table, that we're going to make it through this no matter how hard it was. And as we went through the different way of grieving, the thing for me that worked out well, that I started asking Erica, are you upset with me, or is this life that we're living? And as long as she could look me in the eyes and say, it's not you, then I was good. That was key for me to know that I wasn't doing anything that was increasing her pain or upsetting her, whatever it is. And that was helpful, I think, very helpful for us in getting through things. And go ahead.
And I'm glad to hear you say that divorce was not an option, because so many bereaved parents do not make it, and our commitment to marriage has always been that divorce was not an option even before our child died. And at the same time, to me, the pain of when a divorce does take place for bereaved parents, they'll never be with anyone else that knows the pain
Right.
of having buried the child they had together. So it's like it's even hard to fathom, because you think, if I divorced Debbie and married somebody else, they would never be able to say, we had this child together. Our child died. We buried this child. So there's a almost like a club fraternity type relationship that you lose that if you divorce. And so I've seen many parents through like groups and organizations and working with bereaved parents that chose not to stay together, and everybody has their own reasons, but you look back and you think you lose that common thing, which was that person, which was that child. And so yeah, so I encourage your statement about divorce is not an option. That's a great statement to live out. Yeah, yeah.
Dennis, did you find along those lines, did you find that after a year or two, whatever the time frame was, also that when the immediate support of the funeral and all that, the whole world is around you and supporting you, and over time, obviously, people go back to their lives, and
Yeah.
and we lose that support network.
Right.
Did you find in your marriage that that point for an extended period of time where you and your wife were really all that each other had, where I mean, there's always those people who are kind of around us, but really it is each other. We're the only ones that can give each other the true support that we need.
And you can give that true support, and then sometimes you can't even give the support, because because what you want to do, you want to take her pain away. She wants to take my pain away, and the reality is the only thing that will ever take this pain away is being with our child again, and that's
Right.
not going to happen in this life. And so, but yeah, you think about, people mean so well when you're overwhelmed with people at the time of death and a few weeks after, but then all of a sudden it's back to home to each other, our other child, and then we move like we did, and so people didn't even know we had another child. So yeah, but again, don't put such a strong expectation on the other one that you've got to be able to take this pain away, because nobody can take this pain away.
I want to say I don't know if it was the same for you, Dennis, but with Amanda and myself, I think because of the military and because we moved and because we really were just with each other, right? We're thousands of miles away, or not thousands, we're hundreds of miles away, even moving closer. We're still just her and me. We don't have family around to support us.
Right.
You know, if I'm having a bad day, or if she's having a bad day and wants to go spend it somewhere, or we still got other kids we got to take care of. So, in an odd way, I don't think it was God's plan, but losing Mason kind of brought Amanda and myself even closer together in our marriage than I thought could even happen. Like, I thought we were already really strong marriage as it was, and losing Mason brought us even closer together. I think just because even though you can't be there for each other, you could still that lean on each other. I'm here for you, in the sense of, let me just give you a hug.
Yeah.
We need to give each other a hug. That's all we can do right now.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So
good.
All right. So Dennis, I had one other question. Dan and I also have other children. I know you have another son, and then you adopted a daughter. And I'm curious though more about your son and how he kind of progressed through the years, after losing his brother. Because I'm seeing it now, we're not quite at the 2-year mark. One of my children is doing fine. 2 of my children are doing fine. One is still really kind of struggling with it, I think. And I'm just curious how your other son did and how he progressed, and if you did anything to kind of help him through that process while you're dealing with your own grief.
His Chad was the older brother, so he was 9 when Ryan died at age 6, and he's the firstborn. So firstborn kids are firstborn kids. If you know firstborn, I'm a firstborn. Firstborn kids are definitely can be quite goal oriented, and I would say for our son, one of the things we did there was he received some counseling with a child type therapist after Ryan died, which was very beneficial. And for me, my grief was so intense that I was not really great at reaching out to Chad. In fact, we had maybe a little season there when it was quite rough for him and my relationship. Fortunately, we life turned around and we have a phenomenal relationship. And we actually went into baseball card business and had baseball cards, and we'd go on baseball card weekends, and that drew us together. So for me, I think if one of the child's struggling, some good old just basic counseling, some therapy can be very beneficial. And if somehow you can begin to do something special with that child that gives them some attention, that they're only getting that attention. But again, just like all of us grieve differently, even our children grieve differently. And so, does that kind of give you some? And you've got more than one child. So, and our daughter never knew Ryan, so it wasn't like she would go through that process. But every child's different, just like every husband and every wife's different. So
for sure, yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense that we are doing those things, and just like you said, we're actually found that exact path. They're all going through counseling, even though two of them are doing pretty well. Okay. And then we're trying to find individual things to do with each one of them to give them that special attention during difficult times. So and
then again, they have pain. The only way through pain is pain. So I mean, you kind of just that's what we do. We walk through it. Yeah.
And I almost feel worse for my children in the sense that, their world is so much harder than when I was a kid, or in terms of all the technology, social media, coronavirus, just way more struggles than I ever remember as a kid. So, if for those that are listening, if you're dealing with grief or someone dealing with grief, make sure you kind of look out for their other children. Because when you do lose a child, you're going through so much pain. And it's not that you're not thinking about your other children. You're just in so much pain. It's almost like you have some blinders on, and you it's not that you don't want to see them. It's just you don't see it because of that pain. So help them out. Keep a lookout for their other children. Help them get the support that they need to get through that moment.
And for us, the grandparents were very instrumental in being very supportive. Chad has great memories of times with his grandparents and visiting them, even though we sometimes lived a distance away. So it's not just up to us as the parent to see if we can help the child who's grieving a sibling. Enlist other people, other family members, anyone that can be beneficial like that.
I think that's a huge piece of advice for people who are not grieving, because I struggle with it too, of how do I grieve? And I think we could tie a few things we've talked about together. How do I grieve myself and try to get myself healthy while trying to support my wife and walk with her, while trying to lead my family? Because as a man, we want to lead our family and protect them and take care of them and provide for them, and be a good father to Reese. And then again, circle back to God. I've got to help myself and heal myself, and I'm worthless to everybody else if I'm a mess. So I think kind of what Chris just said. For anybody listening, if you have kids who are around the age of the siblings of the grieving family, as much as you possibly can, include them in your activities, and just hey, we're going to the movies today. Can Reese come? Hey, we're going bowling today. Because it takes for that 2 hours, at least for me, it took that pressure off. You know what? Reese is going to go have fun. He's not going to remember or care who it's with to an extent. He just isn't going to be around while we're sitting on the couch crying, going through Jameson's things, whatever it is. So as much as you're able to include the grieving sibling, I think that is an enormous way that people can help.
Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah, definitely. I remember when Mason first passed and went to heaven, when we were in New York right after the funeral, we were there for about 3 weeks, and my aunt and uncle own a farm, and they invited us out to the farm to just kind of have some fun on the farm with the kids. And I had noticed, I mean, I really didn't want to go. I was obviously not feeling it. But my boys, even though they were sad, they were so bored, it was making it worse. They just couldn't, they couldn't, I don't even know the word. They were so bored of just sitting around watching mom and dad cry that I was like, I'm just going to tough through this and go. And I did, and I'm glad I did, because it broke up that monotony for them and gave them a fun day. So,
good.
Yeah, it definitely think of those ways to help out.
Absolutely.
So, Dan, you got any other last questions for Dennis
don't.
here?
I do not. Dennis, I thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story, but more importantly, sharing your wisdom being 30 years in, 35 years in, 30, it's just such a help, I imagine, to so many people that you are proof that there is light at the end of this tunnel, and we need it. So thank you, sir, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Good going with you.
Dennis, if you want any parting words real quick before we sign off.
Just 1 minute at a time, and before you know it, 1 minute at a time has become 37 years. That's how I look at it. But you got to go. You got to do the 1 minute at a time. That's how it adds up.
Well, that's some great advice, and I know Dan and I are following that every day, to be honest. So, we want to thank everyone again for coming on and listening to this episode with Dennis. Dan and I truly appreciate everyone's time, because we know time is precious with your family and friends, and but we hope we were able to help you out with something. If you have any questions, or you'd like to be on the episode, or you need help with something, you need help trying to get deal with grief, you can reach out to Dan or myself on social media, on Facebook, info@jamesonsjoy.org, Chris at milesformasonmemorial.com. Any one of those ways, you can reach out to us, and we'll be glad to help out and help you get through that grief, because no one should have to do this alone. So with that, Dan, anything else?
That's it. Thank you, bud.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Have a great day.